Hi, Henry. Hi, Cora. Hi, Bonnie. Um, I haven't read for like 3 days, I think it's been since I've read a book. So just in 3 little days, I feel almost out of practice. Anyway, I'm getting back into it. I have a whole bunch behind me on the bed. I don't know if you can see them. Look, whole bunch of library books to read to you guys. Okay, so if I read every day, then I just read, but I got a little bit of talking about it first today. Anyway, this is called The Toy Brother by William Steig. I think you'll like it. I'm not familiar with it, so I think you'll like it because I like his books. The Toy Brother. Agnes Bede, the famous alchemist, and his happy-go-lucky wife, Utilda, thought they had a harmonious family, but their older son, Yorick, considered little Charles a first-rate pain in the pants and always occupied him with something silly. So I guess this one is Yorick, and that's his younger brother, Charles. Mr. Bede made the mistake of allowing Yorick to be his apprentice, and Yorick got the notion that he would eventually surpass his father as an alchemist. He had visions of accomplishing such unheard of miracles as turning plain old donkey dung into gold. As for Charles, he spent his time chasing chickens, poking around in ant hills, and arguing with the goat. He couldn't fathom why Yorick avoided him except to give him a wallop every now and then. Sounds like the two brothers don't get along very well. Excuse me. One day, one May morning, Magnus and Utilda were making ready to journey to a faraway wedding. Mrs. Bede reminded the boys to milk the goat and feed the animals, and Mr. Bede again warned Yorick, "Don't forget you're still no alchemist, so stay out of my lab." The Bedes soon disappeared over the hill. They would not be back for at least a week. Charles was glad Papa had forbidden Yorick the lab. He hoped now, at least, they would get to be palsy-walsy, perhaps even do some chicken chasing together. But Yorick had other ideas. So Charles went off on a ladybug hunt. He caught a couple when he spied some thrashing toward him through the weeds. He assumed it was a mole until he heard it saying, "It's me, Yorick, your brother." What? It was indeed Yorick. Down to the minuscule wart on his knuckle. It's actually Yorick. "Egad," Charles gasped. "What happened to you?" "What does it look like?" said Yorick. "Don't tell me you snuck into Father's laboratory." "Yes, Goosewit," said Yorick. "Yes, Goosewit," said Yorick. "And I invented a new potion. But when I tasted it, zazing, I was no bigger than a cockroach. So I squoze under the door, and here I am." Charles hastened inside to the kitchen with Yorick clinging to his thumb, squealing, "Don't drop me, you dolt!" It was just too marvelous. Yorick had made himself as small as a sausage, and with only a drop of training. "Stop staring, will you?" said Yorick. "I have to undo what I did, or Papa will murder me. You've got to help." "Okay, Peanut, take it easy," said Charles. "There's still oodles of time before he gets home." Now Charles is the bigger one. Meanwhile, Charles announced, "I'm going to build you a house. But what about the lab?" "Don't rush me," said Charles. Humming happily, he set about making Yorick his very own house. Charles was relishing this immensely, and when his toy brother stuck his head out the window of his new residence, it was all just as real as peas and beans. "Brotherkins," Charles said, "it's dinner time." He served up 3 crumbs of bread and a spoonful of clabber cheese. He himself was too excited to eat a thing. Running the show was so gratifying that Charles found himself wishing Yorick would fit in his pocket forever. Yes, it was rotten to be thinking this way, but how could he tell his brains how to operate? In the morning, Charles decided that Yorick needed some fresh air, so he took him out for a walk. Suddenly, the sky darkened, the wind started howling, and they were pounded by hailstones as big as cherries. To Yorick, they felt like cannonballs. "Help!" he cried. It finally struck Charles that his little bit of a brother would always be in danger. He could easily be stepped on by a donkey or even by his own dear mother. He could drown in a bucket of milk, get eaten by a thoughtless cat, or be seriously injured by a field mouse who was feeling his onions. Charles didn't want any such thing to happen, even if it meant he'd have to be the baby again. He tucked his brother into his tunic and hurried home to put lard on his wounds. "Yorick," he said, "we've got to make you big again. We have got to get to work." Now Yorick took charge. "Papa taught me that each ingredient in a potion has its own special antidote," he said. "We've simply got to find the right ones." "How about this pink stuff?" Charles said. "No," said Yorick. "Just do what I say." After mixing this and that and the other, Yorick believed he had what was needed, but one single drop on his tongue made him retch and black out. Retch means like throw up. Charles was sure Yorick was dead, but he came to in less than a minute, looking very embarrassed. "Brother," he said, "this is a job for a professional. We better wait for Papa." To make the time go faster, Charles tried to keep his brother amused. First, he dressed the goat up in one of his mother's best outfits, and then he squeezed the pig into his father's purple tunic. But Yorick wasn't amused. He only wanted to be his real self again. One night, Yorick shook his brother awake and said, "What if I never get to be big again?" "York," said Charles, "I'm sure Pops can make you big again. But just in case he can't, and you have to stay in this condition, I'll take care of you as long as you live, even after I get married, whether my wife likes it or not. And I mean it, so don't worry your little noggin." At daybreak, the boys heard familiar voices calling, "You Worky! Charlie!" They scrambled out of bed and out of the house, and there they were, their 2 parents. Charles got hugged and kissed again and again, as if they hadn't seen him for a year. "And where's Yorick?" they wanted to know. Do you see where Yorick is? He's hiding behind a rock. "Here he is," Charles said, holding him up like a carrot. The beads were bowled over. They stared at tiny Yorick, at Charles, at the wide, mysterious heavens, and at each other. At last Mrs. Bede took up her son, kissed his little head, and held him to her bosom. My chick, she sobbed, my itty-bitty bantling. Mackaday, the father murmured. What happened? And Yorick, his flabbergasted parents, hunched over him, told them his shameful story. Oh, alackaday. I was reading it sideways. Couldn't see it. Magnus Bede carried his son straight to the laboratory. Is your original potion still here? Yorick showed him the flask and everything he'd put in it. Borage, betony, camphor, and sauerkraut. Don't worry, said Mr. Bede. I can whip up a cure in a minute. But the cure had no effect. Are you sure you remembered everything, Yorick? Think. Yes, Father, I did. Well, think harder. Something's got to be missing, said the famous alchemist. The antidote isn't working. Utilda Bede cheerfully started making tiny clothes for her tiny son. A tiny bed with a tiny bedspread and a tiny chair with a cute little cushion. She cooked him tiny puddings and baked him dainty pies. Her new baby kept her too busy to worry. Tilda, Mr. Bede said finally, I give up. Well, said his wife, he'll have to stay this way. Who cares? He's strong, handsome, and brave. And he has a fine horoscope. Let me drink some of Yorick's potion, Charles said. Then we can be twins. Gadzooks, said Mrs. Bede. What a noble idea. I'll drink it too, and be a proper mother for you both. Perhaps Mr. Bede will join us like a proper father. And who, Mr. Bede screamed, will look after us minikins? Everyone clammed up. That evening, after a supper consumed in silence, Mr. Bede said, Son, I fear you are fated to be our little elf forever. And he sighed a long, sorrowful sigh, reeking of ginger. Ginger, ginger, Yorick cried. I ate some ginger before I drank my potion. Aha, Magnus Bede exulted. Ginger, that's a fish from another pond. Is it any wonder there was no transmogrification? Now I know what to do. And they all ran back to the lab. There, the truly wise alchemist took his original formula for restoring his son's stature and added pot cheese to counteract the ginger. He fed the mixture to Yorick, reciting these words. Orkness, borkness, foofle-cadoofle, kiffle, coffle, craffle, craffle, froom. Magnus Bede chewing his lip, his wife chewing her nails, and Charles chewing her apron, all stood goggle-eyed as Yorick swallowed the antidote, shivered, shook, and shot up straight to his full height. He's big again. Whereupon the whole Bede family, especially the proud father, went altogether out of their medieval minds. They hugged and kissed, wept, laughed, sang, yodeled, and raced around like a bunch of maniacs. But Yorick still dreamed of turning donkey droppings into gold, and little Charles developed a passion for making toy dolls, which somehow all resembled Yorick. The two brothers sincerely appreciated each other now, except when they were having a fight. The end. I liked it. Did you? I hope so. Love you.